Hi, I'm with Joe Kike today, and Joe is a relationship and intimacy coach, and works with both men and women and couples together. And so Joe has just been such an inspiration for me, um, understanding kind of what he's bringing to men, and understanding what he's bringing to women as far as what to expect from an integrated man, and how that can be even challenging for women as well. And so it's really such a gorgeous message that Joe brings through, and I'm really excited to get started to hear more.
Yeah. Um, yeah, thanks for, I really appreciate you reaching out to me to begin with, including me on this. I had no idea how big it was going to be. You invited quite a few people, and um, I've seen multiple people whose work I'm familiar with and respect. So I was like, wow, looks like it's going to be pretty legit. Um, yeah. So relationship and intimacy coach, it's in order to get, just to kind of give a brief synopsis of what that even means. Like where I take that is becoming so intimate with yourself that intimacy in relationship is a breeze. It's natural. So it's the work I do helps people get to the point of being so comfortable with themselves intimately that it just works.
Those words just feel so good in my system. So, and I can understand it, that it's just natural. Like we when we're doing this work, it's natural to want to go into the depths automatically and be there and not stay in the shallows. And yeah, so that just felt really nourishing to just to hear those words. So sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. Um, I want to. I mean, this is your men's light dark summit, so just want to give you a chance to lead things where you'd like to go as far as questioning. I can certainly talk about the the work I do with men, as we've already mentioned. But did you did you have more that you want to ask me around to get started? No?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that men have a teacher, a lineage, a model of behavior to bring through. And what I heard when we were talking earlier is that you started working with men, opened it up to women, and then women were dragging their men to you.
Right.
Um, as like this is just an important initiation, this is an important process, and I understand too through my own journey, that what this integrated masculine looks like in the psyche is the most challenging um, thing to kind of move through. And what I mean by that is that it's the thing that we really don't want, but we actually need. Um, but the energy that templates as far as what this integrated masculine looks like in Joe and so many of the other men who've been on the summit is that the the way it templates in the psyche is like judgment and things we're not used to, and a really hard dense energy that we're not used to coming into full contact with, like consciously. So when we do that, we're expecting a whole bunch of things, but what actually happens is this alchemical process of integration, and that is the energy that you guys just bring through, is this very strong, intense, secure masculinity. um, and and we were touching on that integration piece, that power, that transformative energy that is so regenerative. Is that
Regenerative.
being the threat is like that you've cooked off so much in your process of what's not you, and transformed so much that you just stand in front of us And it's just so powerful to see men like you. And so I really wanted to honor that in you, but I would love for you to kind of introduce what happens, you know, in your work with men, and what it looks like for you, what you're focusing on. And I feel like that's 3 questions. So I feel like if I just leave it there, you'll be doing good for quite a while. So can I hand it over?
It's funny.
Yeah.
You're funny. All right. So, yeah. So what I do is, let's revisit those those 3 questions, all packed into one. So you're asking what I do and how it relates to masculine, feminine within men, light and dark, with masculinity, and what that kind of looks like in the work I do. Yeah, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I want to kind of give a brief background of my own history, just if that's all right. Is that cool?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was raised by, you know, and I don't want to get too mired in any traumas or difficulties, but I was raised by an alcoholic, abusive father. My own father was absent until I was 8 and rarely around after that point. I never really had a very good role model, father figure, male role model in my life. And there were a lot of questions that I had around my own masculinity, what that meant. I was an emotional boy, like emotional in the sense that certain circumstances would make me quick to anger, feel hurt fairly easily, feel insulted, just be challenged by my own sensitivity, my own love. Feeling loved made me uncomfortable. Lots of things that I had difficulty around, not only understanding my own masculinity, what that looked like, from basic things like, you know, how to be a man in partnership, how to be a good father, how to pursue your own career and have direction and purpose. All of these things were very confusing to me as a child. And I never had a single male in my life that was like, here's how you do this stuff. Here's how you handle your emotions. Here's how you do life. Here's how you be a man. So I had to learn how to become those things on my own. And I watched a lot of men along the way who I respected to a degree in terms of what they had brought to the world. Men who were really successful, men of integrity, men who were loving fathers. But there were never like any men, like as a whole, that were like, yes, I have this whole package. They all had bits and pieces. I was like, that's really awesome. I love this about this man. Love this about this man. So my journey has always been, how do you become that whole man that is really comfortable with his emotions, really comfortable with his own sexuality, really comfortable and so solid in his masculinity that it doesn't feel as though he has to identify with other men's definition of masculinity to feel masculine himself. He understands masculinity, has no identity to other things. It is here, right? So it's been a pretty challenging journey, and along the way I've learned, I've gone through therapies, I've gone through really great workshops. I've grown through relationships with women who have helped me see who I am and grow. Lots of books, lots of really powerful techniques that have helped me move through the traumas, the difficulties that I had as a kid, as a boy. And so that's kind of like where my journey has been in like a little, you know, we'll call it a nutshell. And I take that and I bring that into the work that I do, because it was the transformation that I had to go through that helps me understand and identify where other men are coming from. Because I know a lot of men, and I've talked to a lot of men along the, you know, over the years. I'm 40. over the course of the decades of my life, I've talked to a lot of men. I've listened to a lot of men around the moments that men have opened up to me and been vulnerable about the abuse they've experienced from their own fathers, about the lack of presence of their own fathers and how that impacts them, emotional presence, emotional and physical absence. And I listen to all that and I see how that shows up in men's lives and how that actually makes them feel, whether they say it or not, feel as though they're lacking something, feel as though they're missing something. And even they can't fully identify with it, because masculinity is something that especially in our Western culture, has been something where you are supposed to be independent, right? You do your own thing, you've got your thing, and that tells you that you are a man, and other men say, great job. Yeah, that's a man. He knows how to take care of his shit. He's an independent man. He's got it going, but he's broken, and he's not able to look at how he is broken, and other men support him in that. And that kind of creates this ever-present lack of integrity and accountability among other men. Does that make sense? Hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, so is that what they're missing then, or is that where what I hear about fatherless men, whether that's physical abandonment or emotional abandonment, and it can be both. But that's what I'm hearing, is that that community, that support of other men, which takes an emotional maturity to kind of stand within that, because it's really challenging, really specifically for men, isn't it?
It's challenging because other men don't model it. If men modeled it for their sons would pick it up like that instantly. That's just the nature of who we become from our parenting. We become who we are as a result of experiencing that through our parents. And if we don't have it modeled to us, we never grip on to what that thing is. And yeah, fathers have passed down to their sons, older brothers to their younger brothers. It just keeps on getting handed down because it's not being properly modeled by anybody at the top, or really not a lot of people out there in general. So, for sure.
Which is a huge loss for women as well. I think that's what we touched on in the first call. Was for women, emotionally unavailable fathers. This leaves a gaping hole in society and in the world. And it's really challenging to put back into its place. But that's the work that you do with men, is to get them in touch with that thing inside of them that wants to be supported as a man.
Yeah, in all honesty, it's at the core of what I do with both men and women. But for sure, I really I would say there's a place in my heart for men who are willing to take that next step, because it's incredibly terrifying for a lot of men. And many men will say it's not, and they just don't want to do it. But I am without a doubt certain that once they get to the edge, there's terror, because it means they're fully exposed. And most people are terrorized by that, like that. They feel terror naturally. So yeah, it's basically what you talk about having about women, like really like I said, dragging their men to me. This has literally happened to me, by the way, those who are listening. They identify with the fact that there's something present here that I'm offering that they'd like to have the men in their lives have. And when the men show up on the call, and this has been consistent with the men that I do work with, I take them to where they can't quite see that they can't see. All right, so it's the part of themselves that's been withheld. It's the part of themselves that hasn't been talked about among other men. And if we identify who we are as men through other men, and the only reflection we get back is that we're not supposed to go there, we're not supposed to look at those things, well, then going to a man to learn how to access and look at those things is going to be like, what's this thing? Like, I don't know what you're doing here, Joe, but I don't like it. It's weird. Once we get past that part, there's huge growth. It's because what it allows a man access to is a deeper part of their hearts that they can then bring to their partners. They can then comfortably bring to wherever they are, because it's no longer something they no longer have access to or unaware is even there. Now it's present. Now it's available. Now it's something that creates ease in their lives and their relationships and their choices and decisions because they're comfortable here in places they didn't know they could be because they didn't even know they were uncomfortable. Does that make sense?
I think that's the hardest part of the process, is first getting in touch with your shadow, learning that there is a shadow and pointing to the shadow. But I think learning the ways that you can't see this thing, but I can see it, and the messiness of that integration process, that is terrifying. And I'm not sure if you've had this experience with women as well, though. Doing men's, or as a woman, doing the work with a man in a man's container is challenging as well, and could be threatening then, and just as scary. I'm not sure if you've had that experience, but I definitely have on my own.
Yeah, so you like, actually this touches on what you said before about men, about how women are impacted by a physically or emotionally absent father. You know, the way that I see that work, to kind of address that, the way that I see that work is a lot of women who have had the experience that I talk about with men having not really had the role models they need, is that women then go into their relationships feeling like, well, I don't know what a healthy man looks like, so I'm going to go with this man that I feel good about and see how it works out, right? So like when you really get it to the core of who you are, when your central nervous system is so sensitized to what healthy looks like, it's not an unfamiliar process. You're like, I feel that this man he's an integrity. I feel that he is present emotionally. I feel that he is emotionally healthy. Like, and granted, everybody's going to have their baggage and their difficulties. I'm not like, I will never say that I'm so clean and clear of all my stuff that there's nothing there for me to process or grow through. So all men have things that they have to process and handle. But when your central nervous system and your body has been, become familiar with what healthy looks like, it can identify it out there. When it's not, the only thing that it identifies is what's similar to what it's already experienced, which is dysfunction, unhealthy, so on and so forth. So unfortunately, I see that show up in women in relationship choices. So they choose men who are unhealthy. But as far as like working with a man, like, yeah, I think that like to work with a man, you have to have a range. I would say, like, you can't just be a man working with men. Like, granted, it'll give you an advantage because there's kind of generally a sense of man between men of a sort of, a natural code, just like women, it's like we understand each other, we get each other, like we get what the dude experiences. So I know how to like understand your relationships with your women, what it's like to, your job and all the other things that come with being a man. But men have quite a range, like especially in today, where you have a man that maybe he's gay, maybe he's bisexual, maybe he's just an emotional man, maybe he's just a sensitive man. And then on the other end of things, you've got this very hardened, success-driven, like pioneer of a whatever that may not be in touch with his emotions at all, but he's really successful. He's accomplished a lot of things. And on this side, you have to be able to help them become, get to somewhere in the middle where they have cultivated a strength within themselves that they're not so sensitive that they can't handle life, And I'm not saying that that's the experience that every one of those individuals would have, but a man who is more sensitive and afraid of becoming all of those things that this man is going to have to learn to grow to here, at least, right? And that's the ideal place you want to be, in the balance. This man is going to have to learn to sensitize. He's going to have to become more in touch with his own emotions, more comfortable with his own sexuality, in ways that this one already is. So we're bringing back both of them to this center point of balance where they can integrate what you're referring to as the light and the dark, right? So it's both sides. It's your feminine, it's your masculine. It's your light and your dark. It's all of those things. You bring them to the center. And because there's such that range where you can get a man like this who just doesn't manage his emotions really well, and maybe he easily flies off the handle. Maybe he doesn't really know how to commit very well, and that's his demonstration of what a man looks like. And he's okay with that because he's not in touch with the impact of the emotional, energetic impact to the people that he's affecting. And so when a man like this disregards the impact, bringing a person who cannot call that man out on a shit and effective way can be really, really, like, we'll say, for lack of a better word, sort of dangerous. I don't know if that's answering your question, but I think that's kind of what you're getting at, yeah?
Well, it's interesting that you went there, but so those men are dangerous because the shadow is unconscious and they haven't. So they're dangerous in kind of hidden ways that aren't necessarily available when women are coming into contact with them at first. But I think if that's what you're used to, and I think that was my question about women, that this is a scary dance to be in polarity in a container with a man, because that this man that they're used to is dysfunctional and threatening, and that's been their experience. So to even open up that in a safe place, that again is, I think, at least as terrifying.
You're talking about a dysfunctional a man that you're talking about in intimacy, in an intimate relationship, a woman that's in relationship with a man that's not really whole.
I meant women who come to you. I think to be in a container with a man, to be in polarity, and to work through and process the relationality with men is what I was pointing to.
So you're saying how a woman might come into a container with me?
Yeah, that's what. Is that not what you understood from my question?
No, I probably wouldn't have said what I said if that.
I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, if I'm going somewhere that sounds like I'm not answering your question, pause me because I just didn't understand it. Yeah, pause and redirect. Like, Joe, you're going the wrong way. So you're asking how would I work with a woman that's in a coaching container that I have in a coaching container, and helping her kind of move through what's the changes through identifying what healthy is versus unhealthy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it may surprise you that when a woman who is unfamiliar with what a healthy masculine response is, experiences it, like I can look at her face on the coaching call and go like, well, that's not how men normally respond. Like either like men normally get a little bit more irritated than that. What's that? What just happened? Or like I can normally feel a man trying to avoid this conversation because it's too uncomfortable or too touches too much on emotional depth. And he just talked about stuff that I've never heard a man talk about. Like, I literally, like, I'm not kidding you, I get those looks all the time, and women actually give me that feedback. So when I see that, that is every time that I experience women go through those moments, just those moments alone, there's growth for them in identifying, like, I go back to the central nervous system and what it energetically feels like to experience a man like that. She begins to identify within her body what healthy looks like. She's like, wait a minute. I have this whole list of experiences that told me that men are like this. Every single one of them. Every time. And now this dude just did something else. Now I know there's something else that exists aside from all this stuff. And she's like, and like, because of that moment, that singular moment, or those multiple moments, it produces an entire different experience for a woman of what a man can be. And when she experiences that, just no different than a man. Like, I had similar experiences myself of what a healthy female partner looks like as well. That changed me, that I started looking for those things in my partners. When a woman identifies with that, feels it, recognizes it clearly, that it's present, available, and possible, she's not looking for anything else. She's like, I know what all that stuff was. I'm done choosing it. I know I have another choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, especially the nervous system part, because even like as approaching those topics, it's like whatever's left in your psyche and your nervous system is like, you're going to go haywire, and then they get a response from you, I can imagine. There is no messiness. And so there's an ease, or, a dropping in a way that they're not used to. And even that is healing in a new template or a new model. And right. I think, yeah, and that's what we touched on too, and what spoke to me about the email that you sent me back. And I was really appreciative that you spent so much work and time on creating that. So I could understand more about some questions I had. But and what spoke to me the most was about this role modeling, that men are supposed to lead, right? Or, that men should be modeling accountability. And that might have been my own distortion or my own projection. And then you kind of put it back into a place where it was like, women actually are modeling behaviors as well. And that kind of established a new norm for me, that like, oh, there is like this role model, like, we're learning from each other in a way that is a more smooth transition can be in relationship and dialogue about how to treat each other, how to learn more from each other. And if we're both taking that responsibility, that feels way more beneficial and healthy than anything that I've kind of taken in as far as relationships.
Yeah.
Do you want to touch more on that? Because
yes.
I'd love to understand it more.
Yeah, so that's actually at the core of everything that I do, what you're talking about. And that's great, like, because that gives me an opportunity to talk about a little bit about masculine and feminine and how that shows up in my work. So right now, at this point in my life, particularly because the last 4 years of my life have been spent learning about masculine and feminine dynamics and sacred relationship, and what I'd call kind of like an emotional agility, emotional energetic agility between partners. So I want to start off by saying one thing in particular about what you just said, and that is that women teach men how to show up for them by how they show up in a relationship. So if a woman chooses a man, she's with this man, and he's out of alignment, he's out of integrity, he's doing things that are clearly harmful to himself, harmful to the relationship. And I don't just mean physical violence. I mean somebody who's checking out, like a man who says I'm committed, but he's emotionally not there, right? Like that's out of alignment, that's out of integrity. Because if you're in a relationship and you're choosing your partner, you're here. You know, like you're fucking here. Like you're choosing that individual, fucking show up, you know? Like that's on both sides. But so a woman that allows that and says, okay, I'm gonna continue settling with this man who's not showing up for me. That teaches that man to continue not showing up for her, right? So there's kind of like a tricky balance there where, yes, maybe a woman feels uncomfortable with or unfamiliar with what it means to tell a man how she needs him more available. Like there are ways that are going to get him to draw him out, and there are ways that will cause him to close down. There are ways that might cause him to overreact. But every single way, like there are multiple choices of how she shows up that will get the response that she needs. That teaches him how to be here, how to show up. Does that make sense? So for sure, you cannot, like a woman that doesn't recognize that is going to go into the relationship. She's going to point the finger at the man and go like, yeah, but he's not this, this, and this. And then she's going to go talk to her girlfriends. She's going to talk to her therapist. She says, you know what? He talks, he's really mean. He says this, this, and this. And then she's not going to look at herself. Her therapist and her friends are going to be like, yeah, you're right. You know, like that's not okay. And you need to leave him, girl. And, you know, like therapist is going to be like, yeah, you probably, you know, maybe you need to start thinking about looking at dating other men. And guess what? At that point, because she hasn't looked at herself to see how her impact is causing, you know, drawing certain things out of him, she goes to the next man and finds out, guess what? Same thing.
I do think that there's something to be said about the fact that we are kind of intermingling with people's shadows, and we don't necessarily have the conscious awareness that we aren't just playing a character to some degree if we're kind of not engaged and not committed, right? If we're kind of going into it in a more lackadaisical kind of a way, we kind of just become their shadow, and we just become puppets for each other, and like we don't know what we're doing. Right. And so we don't understand that like their behavior can then lead us down, you know, a rabbit hole into our own shadow very easily until we can be ready to integrate these things. But I think that happens more so and I think it's quantum physics and quantum entanglement, that we are literally being hypnotized by other people's cells, and we don't know that we're in this quantum dance and this shared experience. And it's just the othering is what I'm hearing you saying, is that like this bad guy, right? I'm good and this is the bad guy. And like there's a loss of humanity and a loss of understanding how these things actually formulate. Yes, but do go on.
Yeah, so what I love about this part of our discussion is that it's the answer, right? So whether you're masculine, feminine, man or woman, how you choose to be present for your partner is the very thing that draws out the experience and relationship that you want. Being able to adjust to your partner relative to whether or not they are masculine or feminine is going to benefit you both greatly, because it means that you can shift in moments that might be awkward, uncomfortable, feel as though the sexual charge between you has just faded, feels as though like you're bumping heads or arguing too much, or there's a whole lot of friendliness but there's not enough sexual charge. Like all of that is your ability to basically do a very, very subtle, nuanced, emotional, energetic dance with one another, right? And And that in that same regard, that identifying, let's say that the holy grail of relationships, right? Man, woman, and or whatever partner, masculine, feminine partner, both partners, woman, whatever your choice, right? Masculine, feminine shows up in a relationship. Both of them take full responsibility of how they show up. If they have an emotion, an emotional charge, a past trauma, something where they're just something that they prefer to have that prevents them from creating closeness between each other, like on either side, you take so much responsibility for how you show up in relationship and how you impact your partner and how you are choosing to be present for your partner for the sake of relationship, for the sake of experiencing sacredness between the two of you. It's necessary to take that much responsibility to have that experience. You cannot not take responsibility for how your impact on your partner or the emotions you're experiencing and have the experience of depth that feels truly, truly, deeply intimate and sacred. It's not possible. So at this point, we're learning, well, how do we bring our masculine and feminine? How do we dance with our light and our dark? How do we show up in such a way that we can do this, not just in partnership, but we're living this way so that wherever we go, that's the experience that other people have of us. Because if we're not living it, it's not something we're truly bringing into relationship. You're living it everywhere. You're not just living it here in a relationship. You're living it everywhere, and that's how you bring it to relationship effectively. So this is really this is the fun part, and this is where ultimately I lead my clients to go, and where I love to talk about, because at the end of the day, that's freedom. Like that's feeling so much comfort in your own ability to love well, love yourself, love others, and not question whether or not that's okay or how you loved was okay. It's whether you're a man or a woman, you show up in a relationship and you take responsibility for your impact, how you're in service, how you're in devotion. And that comes from both sides. So hope that kind of answered some of your questions. If it didn't, and you were like, hey, Joe, you're off.
No, I think it's really interesting because the way you are framing impact and taking responsibility for the way that you're having an impact on, anybody, but specifically in your relationships. That's a really interesting and more sincerely established in the masculine domain, I think. And that's really where we started having this conversation. And I think that model of behavior, to some degree, comes from a masculine energetic dynamic where there's more stable structure, integral point of convergence of self, that there's this accountability and responsibility. And so you talk about this impact that you're having on other people and in relationship, and I see a lot of people, and myself included, probably for years, it was like, but I think this might be part of the process, is that I am not responsible for what's happening in your field, right? That's kind of like,
Go ahead.
So it's a challenging for me to wrap my head around it in this moment, because that's the opposite part and function of what feels very integral in the secure, dark masculine, is that I can't do this for you. I'm not going to save you. I can't, fix what's happening for you, but I can show you and respect you, while you're going to, have to process this and deal with this and be with this. And so there, as opposed to I'm having this impact on other people. Because even to come into the container or the Zoom call with you at first was like, oh my God, this is a very intense, energetic container, because your masculine is very deeply rooted and then very available. And so, but if I'm not conscious necessarily, I would say, oh, you're doing this, Joe, like you're making me uncomfortable, if that was my experience. So how are you going to take impact or take responsibility on the having on me if it's just mine? And so that's where I would love for you to kind of explain that.
Right. So this,
Yeah.
sure, I'll do my best.
Okay.
Again, you tell me, like, pause me if I'm going off in a different direction than you feel you need to hear or would be beneficial to anybody that's listening. So, right. I was raised by codependent parents. So I know very well what it means to feel responsible for others' behavior, which is very different than feeling responsible for my impact on other people. Surely you can say that you've been through relationships where the result of their impact has left you confused, hurt, maybe had to rediscover yourself, that sort of thing, right? So you were in a place of being porous or vulnerable, and the individual who was in your life was careless, we'll say careless, with their behavior. That impact to you caused you to be in a place of having to refamiliarize yourself with what's normal, right? Does that make sense? So that's an example that I would use to say, well, that's a moment, or that's an experience or a life event where that individual was not taking full responsibility for their impact. All right? And it's no different than in relationship, in partnership, because there are going to be a lot of circumstances where a man or a woman, partner, whatever, masculine, feminine partner, are going to be in a position where they can do something that they can have one of two choices. They can do something with a lack of sensitivity and care and consideration and let that impact just do what it does, or they can recognize that if they say this way, or if they do this way, and they are not considering the impact, or they are considering the impact, that is life-changing for that individual in a healthy and beneficial way, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not at all saying, and I've seen this, like, I had to learn this myself, right? And I see it all the time when I coach people, or when I speak about how it's necessary for a partner to take responsibility for their impact. I get a lot of feedback from people who have been like, oh yeah, but what about when she does this? Or what about when he does this? And men need to take more, be more accountable. And yes, absolutely. But that does not make you any less responsible for your impact. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I can see the distinction. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
choose those dynamics of care, empathy, compassion.
Absolutely.
That's going to make an impact in a different way than if you're thrashing or chaotic or okay.
And I also want to add that it's understandable for people who have experienced trauma, who have been through hell, who have had partners who really were abusive, man or woman. It's totally understandable, and I empathize with you if you feel as though that's not a place that you can be. I get it. It doesn't feel safe. Totally understandable. But that's how you have the relationship that's different. You make that choice. It's uncomfortable, it's unfamiliar, but I guarantee you results will be exactly what you desire versus wondering whether or not you will have what you desire in a relationship. It'll feel like you're being met because you're showing up in a relationship in a way that teaches your partner what you're okay with, what you're willing to accept, while simultaneously giving your partner the experience that you would want to have yourself. So, you know, I can tell you that one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life is choose to love, openly love without resentment, the people who have done me harm. And I won't go into the details of it, but I've been through some pretty significant traumas in my life. Very serious traumas that have scarred me, that I'm no longer attached to, and that I have left go, done. Those people who did me harm, immense harm back then, that it took me decades to recover from, I would embrace them and give them the same love that I give a partner that I was deeply devoted to. All because I'm not willing to continue to carry on that stuff and bring it in a relationship. No, not this one that's intimate, not that one. I don't want to carry it. I recognize that if I hold on to that and I bring that anywhere, that impacts those people just the same as it impacted me.
Yeah.
So.
And is that what I mentioned, like, for you, is that like an alchemical process of like baking off or cooking off those residuals, that resentments, those emotions that are yours and in your field that you're caring for others, and bringing those into relationships, whether it's men or women as a whole, like, or specific individuals, is that just getting it off the planet feels like the most important thing, that it's in you, it's gonna, you know, complete its cycles in relationship to other people, and it's really yours to process. Has that been your experience, that that's kind of that uncomfortable, emotional cookery, alchemical cookery process that we have to go through?
Yeah, so it's definitely been an alchemizing process for sure. It's incredibly uncomfortable. Incredibly uncomfortable. Like, getting through that is like, you know, the expression pulling teeth. Yeah, for sure. I didn't get to here without a lot of work, without a lot of integration, without a lot of choosing to accept and own that I am the people that hurt me. I am that person. My rejection of that fact,
It's so layered. It's so layered. Right. Yeah.
Right. My rejection of that fact rejects me. I am rejecting, it's a self-rejection to say that I am not that person. And that creates layers of shame. You know, like, and that shame only creates compulsion to behave in the very way that I say that I am not, in hidden and covert ways. Right? So I integrate and alchemize through saying, I am that. I am that man that hurt me. I am him.
And we were touching on what happens when you don't integrate, or, you know, when you're not going through this, can be terrorizing, excruciating process of integration. Like, if you just had fun at a workshop, it's like, oh, really? And so,
like, to make it lighter and more enjoyable to somehow to integrate, you're saying?
Yeah, but I think you were mentioning that, like, people aren't actually integrating at the depths of themselves what they're processing or what they're learning, and so we remain unintegrated, and that's how we don't get the energy of your presence, Joe, and so many other men who are standing here firm and erect and powerful and challenging, but beautiful, because even in our first call, it was, you being so energetically stable and powerful, and then talking about love and talking about relationships with women. And it was just like, man, we need so many more. And it's just quite something just to be in your presence. So it's, yeah, it's unimaginable that we could even say that you know, haven't done your work, just from the way you speak, just from your intonation, just from, you know, that you are a united front. So I really want to honor you. And then just like have so many men go line up, and then I'll be waiting at the other end of that as they trickle out.
Yeah, no, I do. I really do appreciate. It's, you know, it's the work that I've done. It's seldom appreciated, and I don't expect appreciation, but it's not. It's way different than getting a doctorate degree. It's way different than owning a multi-billion-dollar company. Like, you can do both of those things and never have processed out your own shit. Never. So there's definitely been a lot of work, and it goes unnoticed, and I'm okay with that. But when I do get appreciated, I'm very grateful, truly. So thank you.
You're so welcome.
I do have to hop off here soon. I have a coaching call at 11:30 my time, so I want to make sure that we're wrapping up in a way that feels good to you. So if you have any other questions to kind of tie this up, let me know.
No, that feels really good that that we're gonna end here on this note. And yeah, thanks for coming, and thanks for sharing with us. And I'm sure everyone's gonna get something good and different out of it. So if you want to add anything, you can.
Yeah, I mean, do you mind if I just add how people can contact me if they're curious about my work?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if you for any reason want to reach out to me, you can do it through email, JOECOACH. I'm sorry, I just totally skipped my last name. JOEKEICHCOACHING@gmail.com. Joe Keach Coaching, joekeach.com, and also you can reach out to me through Facebook Messenger, Joe Keach. It's KEICH. A lot of people get that confused and they want to do the I before the E, but it's German, so don't get that mixed up. But yeah, those are the best ways to reach me. Message me, ask me any questions. But grateful to be here. Honestly, I love the conversation and love what you're doing with the summit by bringing these men to talk about some really personal stuff that needs to be heard.
Thanks, Joe. And hopefully we'll keep in touch. If I keep this thing going, would you be willing to come back and talk about something else that feels important at that time?
Yeah, for sure. There's deep and personal conversations are what I do. So that's I'm all about it. But the more we can bring the sort of work that needs to be heard out there that isn't being brought very much, the happier I am.
Awesome. I can feel that. All right. Well, thank you, Joe. Anyone wants to get in touch with Joe, reach out to him in the ways that he described. And really excited to hear more from you. And I'm always following you on Facebook and getting involved in those conversations that you're bringing to the forefront because they are challenging. I really enjoy it. So thank you for that. Yeah, so I'll be in touch soon on your thread for sure. So
awesome. I enjoy it. So yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay. Have a great day.
All right.